Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. My name is Jackie, and I'm the host. Today, I'll be sitting down with Bailey, my sister, who has an incredible story about overcoming adversities. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Bailey.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming on to the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. It's amazing. My sister on the podcast.
I'm so excited to be here.
Do you want to just start and just kind of maybe share a little bit about yourself, where it all began for you?
Sure, yeah. So I was raised in Cranbrook. I was born into what I would call an alcoholic family. My mother was very addicted to drugs. I do not have very many memories of her, but she left by the time I was one, and then just kind of grew up in a pretty chaotic environment, which ultimately kind of led me down a dark path because I think I was just really looking to fit in anywhere, and the group of people that I had found were kind of easy and accepting. And yeah, I fell into addiction at a pretty young age, at about like 16, 17, and that took me to places that I never really thought that I would go. Growing up, I never thought that I would be an addict, and in school and after DARE, I was dead set that like, I am not doing drugs, I will never do drugs. But it's crazy how much things can change over the years. So about 4 years ago, I got sober, and I had 2 kids. And I'm going to school. I'm going to be a dental hygienist. So yeah, that's a little smidgen. A little smidgen about me.
2 kids you got now.
2 kids, yeah.
And so clean and sober.
Clean and sober, yeah. So it was 4 years on October 8th.
Wow. It's so amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's maybe unpack some of that stuff. On the podcast, I kind of say, when you think of holding on to your heart, what do you think of?
So like at this point in my life, when I think of holding on to my heart, I think of like that little voice inside of your head that says like, it's gonna be okay, you're strong enough to do this, it's gonna get better. And maybe not even so much as a voice, but sometimes just like that inner knowing in the midst of chaos and darkness that like it's not always going to be like this, and there is something better to come out of this, or yeah, just kind of like that inner knowing of like you just got to hold on, it's going to be okay.
So has there been a time in your life, or do you want to share a time in your life where you've had to hold on your heart and tell yourself it's going to be okay, that this isn't going to last forever?
Yeah, so truthfully, I feel like over the duration of my life, I've definitely had to hold on to my heart to different varying degrees. I would say that in most recent years, the time that I had to hold on to it the most was the passing of 3 of my really good friends in a very short amount of time. 2 of them from an overdose and 1 by suicide. Yeah, it was pretty much my whole circle. Those were the closest people within my circle, and yeah, it was a very short time, and yeah.
How short a time?
It was, well, Steven, or my friend, he died in March, and then my other friend died in May, and then my other friend died in February of the following year. So it was really like back to back to back. Yeah.
That's incredibly sad, Billy. I'm sorry. And so would you you kind of talked about, you saying 2 of your friends passed away through overdose and 1 through suicide. Did you see that kind of coming for those people, or?
No, so the surprising thing about that is the people I would have assumed, I don't know how to word this, those were not the people that I thought. I guess like in this case of the suicide, yes, but I had also heard it so many times from that person that I had stopped believing it because, you know, yeah.
So
It did very much take me by surprise. At the time, didn't think that it was going to happen then. Yeah.
But he had mentioned to you that he was going to?
Yeah.
Or to some degree over time?
Yeah. He suffered with severe depression, and he would often speak about like not wanting to be here anymore and just different ways of dying. Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, it took me a while to get to the place of like, you know, I am just really thankful that he's not suffering anymore, you know, and in a twisted way, like it is selfish of me to want him to be here. You know, he didn't want to be here, and that is something that like I've had to accept is that, you know, I don't know better for him.
Who was he to you? Like a friend, but to what degree? Like,
he was my best friend. I would actually like consider him almost like my brother, right? Like we lived together. He came to Christmas with me. He was a person I'd call in the middle of the night. Something went wrong, you know, he was there. He was late all the time, but he was there. And yeah, he was a person that you could just be yourself around and talk about anything with no fear of judgment. You know, that you didn't have to put on a facade, and you know, if you wanted to just go there and lay on the couch, like that was okay. You know, you didn't have to be anybody. You could just be. And you know, I sympathized a lot for the mental health issues because, you know, I too have suffered with that to varying degrees. And you know, I think it's really easy for people to say like, oh, just think happy thoughts, or you know, and like I too have fallen into that, which I like to call toxic positivity. But yeah, it's not that simple, you know. Or, you know, I feel like every person with depression or mental health issues have tried to think happy thoughts, you know, and I think if that was so easily of a cure, we wouldn't have such things.
No, it doesn't usually just pan out that way, does it?
No.
Do you want to share a bit about like how you've experienced somewhat similar?
Yeah. It's not something that I often talk about. It's definitely something not something you really talk about at dinner, or, you know, it's, yeah. So I would say my problems with mental health started when I was 7 or 8 years old. You know, I didn't know that at the time, but looking back on it, like for me, it feels very clear. I would like shake my hands like this, and when I was really young, and my family would make fun of me for it.
Did I?
But it was just, you know, I don't know if you did. My stepmother did for sure. That's very a good memory. But like looking back on it, I feel like it was just because like I was so anxious and I just needed to like express that in some way, and like I didn't understand what I was feeling inside. Yeah, and then when I was about 8 years old, I remember like finding pictures of myself when I was a kid, and my parents, they cut off my hair really short, and people would make fun of me and ask if I was a boy or a girl. And I found a picture of myself when I was younger, and I had long hair, and I just like, oh, you're so cute. And I like held this picture up to myself in the mirror, and I was just started crying and being like, why can't you look like that? Like, what happened to you? You know, at like 8 years old, and I just had such hate for myself already. But it wasn't something that like I could openly talk about, right? Like I would try to say like, hey, I'm really stressed out, because that was the only word that I knew to describe how I was feeling. And it would be like, you have nothing to be stressed out about. You're just a child, you know? And it was just like, I received the message of your feelings are insignificant, and, you know, and almost just like what you're feeling isn't real, and not to trust in my own feelings.
And the only language you have is to say you're stressed. You don't even have the language or maybe the teaching of expression of feeling at an age, right? Like that's just a lot of that's a lot packed into one thing, right? And like you kind of shared that you're being made fun of with your short hair. Not only did you just get a bad haircut, but you were being made fun of.
Yeah, so school, I feel, was great until grade 3. I was at one school until grade 3, and I had so many friends, and I felt loved at that school. I knew all the teachers, and you were at that school, and yeah, I had a lot of really good memories. And then the family moved up to another school, and I started school in grade 3 at a different school, and suddenly I was the new kid, and I was the weird kid, and people would run away from me at lunchtime, and I would walk around with school monitors. And
School monitors?
yeah, so like at lunchtime they have like the
monitors.
Yeah, they'll walk around, and yeah, it was a really big adjustment. And I don't think I had any like true friends for a few years, and I had a neighbor, a girl, and when we weren't at school, she would play with me, and then we'd get to school and she would run away from me. And yeah, it was hard, right? Because it was just like, I didn't feel like there was anywhere safe, and for a long time, like that was my safe place, was school, and I would look so excited for school, so excited, and that disappeared, and I started to not care as much in school either, right? Like it was, yeah, I think
kind of a serious kind of point in the story where you kind of had support through school, because you're saying that was your safe place and then it disappeared. So maybe it could be seen as insignificant. I mean, I see the other side of that, knowing what home was like for you in so many ways, that it like is so significant, right? And yeah, so I guess like the question really is like, what did it all kind of look like? I mean, what did you have anything safe then after that, or what felt safe, or what didn't?
Yeah, when I was a kid, for sure, like being around you and Rob made me feel safe. You and our brother, that made me feel safe. And then, yeah, after that was taken away, essentially.
What's your view on it being taken away?
I mean, like, I would probably appreciate if you didn't put this in there, but like, yeah, obviously I feel like it was like taken out one by one, right? Like it was this tactic to skillfully remove us one by one so that like she could have her family.
Why do you feel, I wonder, just this conversation, why you feel that would be should be taken out, if that was our experience?
One, I just said her name, and two, I do just want to be mindful, I guess, of Dad, right? As much as it is my story, I don't want to hurt other people by telling it, Maybe, especially in such a public way. Obviously, like I would sit here and have these conversations with you any day, but I just don't want to hurt them. So is there a way,
let's then leave some of that out of it, I guess, and how can you share your story and your truth without having to talk about what was life like for you, and what was your experience, without saying names and without saying who was there? Like, what did it feel like? What did it look like? How was little Bailey? Like, what did she think and feel?
Little Bailey, I think, was a very is a very confused, lost, hurt little girl who really was just desperately wanting to be loved and accepted, and was willing to kind of go to any length to get it. You know, if that meant that I had to act bad just to get some sort of attention, you know, then I would act bad.
What's acting bad look like?
I don't really know if like acting bad, but just like, I guess, like talking back, or, you know, trying to people please and like do everything perfectly and keep your feelings in and don't be angry and don't show sadness, and, you know, just try to keep the peace, not ruffle any feathers.
What did little Bailey really need back then?
I think, you know, and I guess it's just like, I didn't really know this until like I had children, of like, yeah, I needed my feelings to be validated. I needed a safe place to be able to say like, I'm not okay, and for that to be okay. They needed to feel like my voice was heard and I was safe and loved, regardless of, you know, what I did. And that, like, I was lovable, you know, and yeah, you know, and I definitely did get a lot of that through, like, you and Rob, and, you know, I always felt really safe when you guys were around, that's for sure. Yeah.
It is sad because we did leave home early, me and Rob both, and you kind of were left in the house, and what I kind of visualize is fending for yourself in a way, right? And, you know, your safety kind of left at a really tender age for you, right?
Yeah, it was definitely really hard, because it kind of felt, in no way, like, no fault of your own, but just kind of felt like I was alone, right? Like I didn't really have anybody. I didn't trust anybody else in the house enough to talk to them. And the dynamics of the house also made it feel that, like, it wasn't an option to talk to anybody on the outside. So it was just really like, I learned how to bottle things up, you know, and just force a smile and just try to keep it together.
That doesn't always work out, hey? Does it?
No, I learned that the hard way too, that the more you try to bottle things up, the bigger the explosion, unfortunately.
Do you want to share a time when you felt like that was the case?
I don't know if I could pinpoint like a specific time, but I know for me that if I don't in some way express like what I'm feeling, and like let things build, it'll come to a point where like the smallest thing will happen and it's just like I can't hold it back anymore, and it's just like verbal diarrhea. The lid pops off. Yeah.
How about like before, when you're 4 years clean, so, you know, I guess having kind of an inside track and timeline of your life from knowing you as my sister, like, I'm kind of just painting a story. So little Bailey wasn't feeling all too safe at home. Little Bailey had a big transition. She went to a different school. She had a hard time making friends, was pretty isolated and alone. Your home life's not great. Your brother and your sister leave. You're kind of figuring things out on your own, and not the most ideal environment. These are my words, not yours. But correct me, like, if I'm wrong, right? And then what happens after that? What happens? You know, you're bottling your emotions, you're pretending to be okay, you're not talking to the outside world. Then, you know, what I feel like you're left with a lot. Your mom left, we didn't even know her. Never got to really meet her, and then faced with a lot of different family dynamics. And then I'm just wondering, like, how that might relate to some of your earlier drug use and your going into that kind of life of kind of probably numbing the pain.
Yeah, I would say that it definitely probably played a significant role in leading me to my addiction. I don't want to blame my addiction on that, but yeah, I feel a lot of the reason that I did use drugs and drink was to either create a feeling or to get rid of a feeling. Like I was sad and I wanted to feel happy, or I wanted to just not feel anything. And I didn't know that I was going to be addicted when I started doing them, right? It felt, in a weird way, kind of innocent, right? Like experimenting and just having a good time. And then it got to a point where I couldn't function without it, and how quickly that transpired, still baffles me.
How it started and how it ended.
Yeah.
And
all the
probably
things
how quick.
Yeah, and all the things that, like I said, I would never do, and just one by one, knocking them down. Saying drugs that I would never do in ways that I would never do them.
Was there a time in particular when the first time in particular when you thought, okay, this is bad, or this is going to get bad, or, when you kind of cross that line, when you're like, there's no coming back from this?
Yes, but I'm not going to share it on here.
So using drugs in ways that you never thought you would, and using drugs that you never thought you would, and kind of going deeper and darker into addiction, right? And finding probably the next strongest thing that's going to work to take care of the feelings that you have, or give you feelings that you wish you had, or whatever, right? What I guess, what did that life look like for you? Like, what did your addiction look like for you?
It was chaotic. It was dark. It was lonely. I became a person that I never wanted to be. I felt like I was literally just following in Mom's footsteps. The person that I said I would never be like, and things that I said I would never do, to break those boundaries with yourself and that trust within yourself. It does affect a person for sure, right? And it affects the way that you view yourself. Sorry, what was the question again?
I think the question was just what life looked like for you, right? And you described that, right? Like a really dark, lonely place, and being someone you never thought you'd be, and realizing that you're walking in the same footsteps that you knew so desperately that you didn't want to follow. You talked about being in DARE when you were young, and just not recreating that, but then somehow finding yourself there, right? And I can imagine, and from my own experience too, in a similar thing, is, the shame that goes along with, letting yourself become the things that hurt you, right? And how sad that is, right? And it's almost, you get there without even realizing you had a choice in it, right? It just almost feels destined, right?
Yeah, destined. I used to actually say in my addiction that I feel like I was destined to be a drug addict because my mom was a drug addict and my mom's mom was a drug addict, and it was almost like this way of I guess, justifying what I was doing, right? Like, this is my destiny. This is like, and it's sad too, right? Like, I didn't think that I was worth or was going to amount to anything more than that. And I was just like, at that moment, accepted that. You know, like, this is my reality. And I felt like I was too far gone, right? Like, I didn't know if I was going to be able to come back from that, because I had tried multiple times. And it felt like, not like it felt like I did every time that it was like day 3, 4, I would run.
You would what? Sorry?
I would run from the detox center that I was at, or yeah, the first time I went to treatment, I ran, and I greyhounded from Vancouver to Cranbrook, you know, all on my own.
What do you make of that time? Like, do you think that you just, yeah, like, looking back, just were not ready, or like?
I think, yeah, a lot of it had to do with not being ready, and at the time I was kind of being forced into it, because I was told that, like, my family wasn't going to talk to me anymore if I didn't go. So I went.
How old were you then at
19.
this time? 19, treatment.
Yeah. And I made it 30 days. And on the 30th day, I was allowed to go out by myself. And that was enough freedom for me. That's all I needed. And yeah. You know, but I can look back on that, and at the time I did feel a lot of shame, you know, but I don't feel so much shame about that anymore, because although I wish I could have gotten sober then and, you know, saved myself a lot of grief, I am really grateful that I did go to the lengths that I went to, because I know now what that looks like, you know, the real reality of where that's going to take me, you know. And I've lost enough friends to know that, like, it is life or death, and you just really never know. And you may think that, like, it's not going to be you, but every single time that you take that chance, it's a gamble with your life, you know, whether that's something that, like, I'm willing to accept or not, you know, that is the truth of it.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe, like, let's just summarize. So, like, if you were to describe your childhood in 3 words, what would you say about it?
It was chaotic, unpredictable, and lonely.
And do you think that, like, you started to create some beliefs about yourself in the world in that?
Yeah, very much so. You know, a lot of my life growing up, I was told that I was bad, and I feel like I embodied that at a certain point. You know, it felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't good, so I might as well just be bad. And I took that and I kind of ran with it. I still struggle with the beliefs of that, like, I'm not worthy, or I'm not loved, or what I have to say is not important. I struggle with letting people see me be authentically in my emotions. I often hold back my tears or act like I'm not mad. Maybe not so much act like I'm not mad, but I force myself not to be bugged by things. Even though, like, it does bug me, I can shove it down. I am getting better through my recovery and working on myself, of being more authentic in my emotions, and, like, understanding that I don't have to be happy all the time for people to want to be around me. But it feels really uncomfortable. You know, I feel really weak when I show emotions or I cry, but it's so strange because, like, anybody else that does it, I'm like, you're so courageous, you know. So just kind of having that.
Do you ever feel, like, jealous or something, like, when you see someone crying and, like, expressing their emotions? Are you ever like, man, like, fuck you, I wish I could do that?
I wouldn't say so much of, like, when people are crying, but, like, when people are just, like, really assertive, right? Like my best friend, and even you, right? Like they're very assertive people. And you say what's on your mind, and you don't really have trouble with confrontation. Whereas me, like I really struggle with confrontation. And if I can avoid not like confronting somebody about something, then most of the times I will.
This is
pretty
still
easy.
happening today for you? You're kind of still working on this piece of...
Yeah. I definitely have gotten better, but it's still very uncomfortable.
What's, I guess, the risk of speaking up?
I guess rejection maybe, or like abandonment, or I don't want people not to like me. I want to be liked and I want to be loved, and I also don't like hurting other people's feelings. So if I think that something I'm going to say might possibly hurt them, I would usually refrain from saying it.
So it's those two phases of your life have really given you a lot of things to work on.
Yeah. Yes.
And let's maybe talk about that, right? Like, you went to treatment a few times, I think, right? 19 definitely didn't work for you. You ran away. You kind of lived a more rough lifestyle. You kind of like probably, I don't know exactly, but the relationship from family was probably not much, if any, hey, back then. And then what happened for you? When did you kind of shift things around? You've got a completely different life today, so I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, so I had tried to get sober before my friends had passed away, and I was like pretty sober. I had drinking a couple times in those 2 years, but like overall, like I was not doing drugs, and I was doing really well. And then after my friends had passed away, after the first two, I was working a lot, and I wasn't doing the things that kept me sober to begin with, and I wasn't expressing how I felt about it and just shoving my feelings down about it, and the grief. And ultimately that got the best of me, and I relapsed. And so in that relapse, so it took me so low that I knew I was either going to die or I was going to get sober. And that was very, very clear to me. And then my brother actually came and found me where I was. And I can't explain to you like how I knew, but as soon as I was in his vehicle, it was just felt like just so safe. And I just knew that like it was going to be okay. And it was really kind of like another hold on to your heart moment, right? Like it was like, I am going to be okay. And it was the first time in months that, I felt some little resemblance of peace. And from there, so I went to a recovery house, I went to detox for 2 weeks, and then I went to recovery house for a month. Then I went to treatment for 3 months. And treatment was really intensive. The first time I went to treatment, I actually went there and I ran because of like the groups they had were so intensive, and I was scared, and I was like, I am not doing this. But that was the reason that I went back, was because it did scare me, and I knew that, that's probably a good thing. I needed that. I needed to get uncomfortable, and I needed people to call me on my shit. And I was able to unpack a lot of stuff from my childhood and grief of mom, and I got to write her a letter, and that felt really good, right? Kind of just to say everything that I never really had the chance to, and to let go of a lot of that, and to work through some of the issues with myself and understand addiction, and, I'm not just a terrible person. I was really sick, and I struggle with the disease of addiction, even though, sometimes I struggle maybe with the concept of it being a disease, right? Because it's hard not to blame yourself for like ending up in that situation. But it was nice to know that like it is something in my brain, and not so much as like a character flaw within myself. And yeah. And
So you had your relapse, and then you went to these intensive treatment centers, and you did. That was kind of the start of the work for you in kind of a healing journey.
yeah.
You had a little bit of sobriety or clean time prior to this, but this kind of felt different for you, did it?
It did, yeah. I think before I really wanted to kind of do things my own way and hang out with all the same people and do all the same things, just not do drugs, and that didn't work out very well.
You say you hang out in a barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut.
Very true, yes, very true. I got my hair cut. Yeah, and ultimately, so through my sobriety, I was able to get pregnant. And okay, let's restart that. You asked me a question. I was just trying to like.
Oh yeah, no worries. I think, yeah. So we're kind of chatting about how you started your healing and how that kind of came about, and I'd be curious to know what beliefs you've been able to shed about that, and like what lifestyle changes that you've been able to make, and how you treat yourself now as opposed to how you used to, and just how you position yourself in your world today as opposed to what it was like.
Yeah, I feel I definitely have a lot more love for myself today. I have a lot more respect for myself today. I feel like I am worth more. I feel like I actually have a chance at a future, and that I can be something. I feel a lot of purpose, especially like in my children's lives, and a huge responsibility in that. And trying to raise them in a way that like they won't have to heal from their childhoods, and I'm really trying to do the work now so that they don't have to do my work and theirs.
What's it like being a mom to 2 kids and like not having had that experience with a mom?
It's really challenging because I often refer to it as, it's like trying to do mechanics, but you don't know anything about a vehicle, right? It's like kind of what it looks like, but you're not sure of all the pieces and where they go and like how to do it. I've definitely taught myself a lot through reading and through podcasts and through books. But yeah, it is a beautiful, beautiful challenge, and yeah, it's interesting doing something that you've never properly been shown how to do.
Someone's told me like having kids is like you heal parts of yourself, you heal parts of your childhood, and maybe some of the things that you weren't given, like you've gotten this, you're kind of seeing it like play out, like, and have you had that experience where you feel like this is healing me, or maybe opposite of that, like it's really triggering me, or like?
I feel like it has been like pretty healing, Say for example, if one of the kids like spills something, a common reaction in our household would be you'd be getting screamed at or shamed, or like, be more careful, how could you do that? So like when those things happen and I'm able to just stay calm and say it's okay, and we get a rag and we clean it up, and there's cooperation between us and nobody's in tears over spilt milk, I feel like a part of my inner child gets healed. And when I'm able to show up for them on a consistent basis, and yeah.
You're really rewriting the script, the narrative that you've had going for most of your life, right? Up until you probably got sober and were able to say different things. But like with your kids especially, right? Like just having to probably be like, whoa, okay. You know, how, not what you've had done to you, but how you want it to happen and unfolds going forward.
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like what happens in my body and how I react to them are very different, right? In my body, it feels like a lot of anxiety and anger and just like sometimes a little bit of rage. But to be able to like channel that and to respond calmly and confidently it's tricky. I feel like I do a good job of it, but controlling my own emotions, I would say, is the hardest part of motherhood.
Yeah.
Hands down. Yeah.
Do you feel like talking with other moms that that's like a common experience, or do you kind of attribute that to your childhood? And
I think it is a common experience among mothers, parents in general, but I also do think that it is part of my childhood because I feel like people do what they were shown, right? So something happens and I feel like my first reaction is to want to yell, even though I know that's damaging. But like I still want to. But I can't. Well, I can, but
again, you choose not
can't.
to, right?
Yeah.
Because you've grown and you want something different, I think.
Yeah, I do. I really, really do. Yeah, I want to be the mother that I never had, that we never had. And I don't want my kids to grow up wondering why drugs were more important than them, or, why wasn't I enough to stick around. Yeah, like I want those kids to grow up and be like, my mom loved me so much, and just for them to know that like I'm always going to have their back, and there's nothing that they could do that would make me stop loving them. And yeah, that they're amazing for who they are and not for what they produce.
That really sounds like nice, like more than nice, but it just, yeah, it sounds healing when you say it out loud, right? Like it's unconditional love that you're giving. And I can imagine that might be hard if you've, grown up feeling unlovable, like you're not worthy of having it, right? And finding a way to give it now and doing it, right? And showing up and being clean and being sober and doing it differently, right? What do you think, like what are some of do you struggle with sobriety or any of that today, or does it, like, where is that journey at for you now, 4 years in?
By struggling with sobriety, do you mean like am I struggling to stay sober?
Yeah, I guess emotional, so like are you emotional sobriety, like you're not using the substance, but does that feel easy at this time, or are some years been easier than others?
I feel like right now has probably been one of the tougher times in my sobriety. Just after having my second, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. So that on top of, trying to be, again, a new mother with a toddler and go to school, it can feel really heavy some days, and it's hard not to get kind of lost in it and lost in being a mother. So I'm really grateful to be here tonight and out of the house, feel more of like a human.
This is a night out for you, hey?
A person, yeah. Not just
You're
a
in
mom.
the thick of it with 2 young kids and doing more in your life than you probably ever have, right? And maintaining so many things, and yeah, well, I get to see it personally, and it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, it's a lot better for sure. I'd choose this any day. So no, ultimately I don't think I am struggling to stay sober. I'm struggling with my mental health, but like today for me, relapse is not an option because I know how fast it would all get taken away.
You got a purpose. What would you tell somebody who they could be struggling with motherhood, they could be struggling with addiction, they could be in a really dysfunctional family setting. Like, what would you tell that person?
I guess it sounds cliche, but I would say to reach out. Don't keep it all to yourself, and find your tribe of people who will accept you and call you on your shit. And know that not everything that your mind tells you is true, and that it gets better.
With your story, Bailey, I feel like there's so many different things that you could talk about for probably longer periods of time, and I wonder if there's anything that you, when you came on here, were hoping to talk about that you hadn't been able to, or a piece of yourself that you want to share, if there's anything that you want people to know about you, or better yet, even like a question of like, what don't you want people to know about you, right? Like, those are the things that people want to hear, right? Like the things that we try to hide away are usually what people like to know. And no pressure to say it, but
what I wouldn't want people to know about me, I guess, would be that like I do care what other people think about me. I think I've always tried to have that persona of like, well, I don't care what you think. I think it's a self-defense mechanism. But ultimately, yeah, like I do care what people think about me. And I want to do good by people.
Do you feel like you do good by people today?
Today I do, yeah. I've definitely done wrong by people. But I can say that like I don't live that way today, and I feel like I can trust myself today, and those around me can trust me. I feel like I am trustworthy. I have also not been before, but I also use those kind of dark times in my life where I was a person that I didn't want to be, to become the person, or sorry, how am I trying to word this? That
fueled you.
Yeah,
your
like
fire.
being who I didn't want to be fueled me to become who I wanted to be, right? And I had to unlearn almost everything that like I was, and unravel that to become to continually become who I want to be. And it's, just keep doing the next right thing, and that saying is so true.
What was the hardest part about, I guess, what's the hardest part of unbecoming to become a newer version of yourself, or a better version, a grown version of yourself?
Letting go of that this is just the way I am, and just being in such a fixed mindset of like, well, I can't change, this is just who I am, and a lot of blame, for sure. I blamed a lot of how I was on my childhood and things that had happened to me. I was really stuck in a lot of self-pity and blame, so I had to start taking accountability for the actions that I was doing today, and understand that what happened to me was not my fault, but my healing is my responsibility. And I had to be honest, I had to be honest with those around me, and have some humility that I'm not perfect and I have fucked up, but
You're not your mistakes. Yeah, absolutely not. When you talked and you kind of recommended reaching out, were there people or places that you felt like you could reach out to kind of lean on for getting help and support?
yeah, there's some really good programs in the area that I was going to. Obviously, having like my siblings in recovery really helped. There was some resources in Cranbrook that are no longer open, unfortunately. I did definitely access them. Higher power, that was a big one.
Faith.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings back to it's going to be okay, right? It's having that faith. Well, I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
I truly am. I'm so proud of you, and I think like what you've accomplished and is amazing. From knowing what you came from, and not like that every day was like terrible. Like I'm not trying to paint like but it wasn't always nice, right? And there was a lot of stuff that happened, and I mean, without sharing your story, right? Like it's incredible to see kind of the depths that you went and how far you've kind of soared above it all. And you're the first one of us to have kids, and it's so neat to see, and they're the cutest little kids, and you're doing such a good job with them. You've really turned it around, right? And I don't know anyone like you, and I think anyone that listened to your story, and I feel like it's just the surface of what it kind of was for you, right? But it's just you have the courage to come on here and say like things weren't always great, and I'm trying to do better, and you do better, and you are lovable, and you are worthy. And I wonder, do you feel that today? I mean, I think you said you still kind of struggle with it, but
I do, yeah. I think with like the postpartum depression and anxiety, it's a little bit harder to feel that right now, but I do. Like in my core, in my heart of hearts, I do.
You don't talk about that, like maybe for a mom that's struggling with postpartum anxiety or depression, like how does that surface for you? Like, what does it look like?
Postpartum depression, well, the combination of the two for me showed up in ways of like, my heart would just like feel like it was going to pound out of my chest, a lot of crying for no reason, thoughts of harming myself, just not a whole lack of interest in things that usually bring me joy, a lot of isolation, not wanting to talk to anybody, and not answering people's phone calls. That's how I usually know when things are starting to get bad, is I stop answering people's phone calls. And yeah, it can show up in a lot of different ways, but my biggest advice would be to, not judge your feelings, and to know that you're not alone in it, and it doesn't make you a bad mother, and it's a symptom of giving birth, not something you've done wrong.
That's nice.
And that, if you can't take that all on your own, right? Like I really needed to reach out to other people, because like I don't know what would have happened if I didn't. That's too much for one person to carry on their own, and it's okay to ask for help.
It is, and you did, and I'm proud of you for that. Just
thank you.
You're jumping over every barrier, like you're getting the help that you need, and you deserve the help, right? You deserve a good, healthy life, and you can express how you feel today, right, in a way, and be safe in that, and find support, right? So you've kind of blazed the trail. So where do you see yourself in the future? What are your dreams and your goals coming up?
I really hope to finish the dental hygienist course and be successful in my career. I hope to be married, hopefully one day. I want to travel. I want to see the world. I really hope to stay sober and to help other people who may be struggling with addictions.
Those all sound like big dreams. Are you in a relationship?
I am,
For the people
yes.
who don't know?
I am, yes.
Sounds good. Well, my next question was gonna be, where can people find you? But not for a date.
So yeah, if you ever needed to talk, my name on Facebook is Bailey King, and on Instagram it's BAIKINX. So you can find me there if you ever need to talk. I'm always open.
Folks, that's Bacon.
Bacon.
Bacon X.
Bacon X.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you coming on here as my sister and as my friend, as someone in the community that is kind of dedicated to just doing the next best thing by being a better person than they were yesterday, by overcoming adversity and sharing a message of hope to people in hopes to kind of ease your journey and theirs, someone else's, right, that may be listening, that may be able to relate to some of the things that you shared today, right? And that piece of you that says, hold on to your heart, it's going to be okay. And the strength in that, it's really something.
Thanks.
You're really something. I love you a ton.
You too. I love you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm Morgan. I'm the producer of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you'd like to find out more about what we're all about and check out other episodes, you can find us at holdontoyourheartproject.com or on YouTube and Instagram at Hold On to Your Heart Project. Thanks for stopping by.